All right, so you're joining us for another deep dive, which means you're ready to really go deep on a topic. And today we're going to tackle something that has the potential to, completely change the way companies think about innovation.
Yeah, I'm talking about jobs to be done theory, and of course its practical application. Outcome-driven innovation.
And we've been digging into a really insightful book on this Jobs to be Done Theory to Practice by Anthony W. Ulwick.
A fantastic resource for anyone who wants to really understand these concepts. And our goal for this deep dive is, well, pretty straightforward. We want to pull out the core principles of JTBD and ODI.
Yeah, and really demonstrate how this approach can transform innovation from, that kind of hit or miss finger crossing thing it often is into something way more predictable and successful.
Because, honestly, the traditional way of developing new products and services, it's often more like guesswork than science.
It really is. Companies pour tons of resources into ideas based on gut feelings or trends, and the results, well, they're kind of depressing, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, studies show that the average failure rate for new products is somewhere around 83%.
83%, that's huge. So only 1 in 6 new things actually make it in the market.
That's right. It's a pretty stark reminder that just having a cool idea isn't enough.
No, not at all. So this is where outcome-driven innovation comes in, right?
Yeah.
And it claims a success rate of 86%.
It does. It's a complete game changer in terms of potential.
Yeah, it seems like it. So what's the fundamental problem with the traditional approach that leads to those high failure rates?
Well, the book starts with this really interesting story about Tony Ulwick's experience working on the IBM PCJR.
Oh, yeah, I remember the PCJR.
It was supposed to be this revolutionary product, but it ended up being a colossal flop, cost IBM a ton of money. And that experience, it really kind of shook Ulwick and set him on this path to find a more reliable, less risky way to innovate.
Makes sense. To escape that, that gut-wrenching feeling of creating something with so much passion and effort only to see it rejected by the market.
Exactly. I'm sure many of our listeners have experienced that in their own work or projects or even just like in life.
Totally. That frustration of putting in the work and not getting the results you hoped for. So what were the standard methods they were using back then to understand customer needs? And why did they fail in this case and so many others?
Well, even today, the traditional methods often rely on things like focus groups, customer interviews, surveys, right?
Yeah, trying to get inside the customer's head.
Exactly. But as Ulwick points out, those approaches, they lack a consistent framework for really defining what a need is.
Interesting.
There's all this debate about these latent needs stuff customers can't articulate, apparently.
Right, right.
And Jerry Katz from Applied Marketing Science, he points out how we use all these terms like wants, needs, requirements almost interchangeably.
Yeah, I can see how that gets messy.
It does. And Ulwick argues that these are actually very different concepts and that this lack of clarity is a huge problem.
Okay, I'm starting to see the issue here.
We're often asking customers about the features they want in a product rather than focusing on the real progress they're trying to make in their lives.
So it's like instead of asking them about the drill, we should be focusing on the hole they're trying to make.
Exactly. That's a perfect analogy. This is the whole idea behind jobs to be done. It shifts the focus from the product or service to the underlying job the customer is trying to get done.
I see.
Like, think about that famous quote from Theodore Levitt. People don't want to buy a quarter-inch drill. They want a quarter-inch hole.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that one.
And Clayton Christensen built on this idea, saying that customers hire products and services to make progress in specific circumstances. And the key insight here is that this perspective suddenly opens up a much wider range of potential solutions.
Because if you're only focused on improving the drill, you might miss a whole world of other ways to create that hole, maybe even some that don't involve drills at all. Okay, that analogy is super clear. It's all about the desired outcome, the progress the customer wants to make. But how do we take this, somewhat abstract concept of a job and turn it into a practical roadmap for innovation?
Well, JTBD theory provides a structured way to categorize, define, capture, and organize all the customer needs related to getting that job done.
Okay, so it's not just about the core task, but everything that surrounds that task.
Exactly. Ulwick breaks down customer needs into several key types.
Go on. I'm intrigued.
So first, you have the core functional job. This is the main task the end user is trying to accomplish. It's a process with a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Okay, so cutting a piece of wood in a straight line or, I don't know, preparing a hot beverage for consumption.
Perfect examples. And what's important here is that the job itself is relatively stable over time. But the solutions, the specific saws or coffee makers those would, are constantly evolving.
Makes sense. People have been trying to make hot beverages for centuries, but the ways they do it have changed drastically.
Right. And that's a key insight. The fundamental human need or goal remains the same, even as technology and solutions advance.
So what are the other types of needs in this framework?
Next, you have desired outcomes. These are the metrics that customers use to judge how well that core job is being done.
Okay.
And these aren't just vague statements like make it better or make it faster.
Right.
A good desired outcome is specific, measurable, and solution agnostic. They often focus on things like speed, predictability, efficiency, and minimizing unwanted results.
Interesting.
So for example, for the job of listening to music, a desired outcome might be something like minimize the time it takes to get the music to start playing.
Okay, so these are very specific improvements that customers are actively seeking when they're trying to get that job done.
Exactly. And then we have related jobs.
Related jobs.
Yeah, these are other tasks that the customer tries to accomplish in conjunction with the core job. The more of these related jobs a single solution can address effectively, the more valuable it becomes to the customer. Think of a smartphone. Its core job might be communication, but it can also help with things like navigation, entertainment, taking photos, accessing information, and so much more.
Oh yeah, smartphones do practically everything these days.
Right. And that ability to handle all those related jobs makes it incredibly valuable.
I see. It's about the whole ecosystem of tasks that surround that main goal. So what about like the more personal aspects of getting a job done?
That's where emotional jobs come in. These describe how customers want to feel or be perceived by others when they're executing the core job.
I see.
So for example, someone using a high-end professional tool might want to feel competent and respected by their peers. Or someone using a certain type of software might want to feel efficient and in control of their work.
So it's about the emotional and social payoffs that come with successfully getting the job done.
Exactly. Then you have consumption chain jobs. These are all the tasks related to the life cycle of the solution itself. How customers find it, buy it, receive it, set it up, learn how to use it, maintain it, upgrade it, and even dispose of it. Each of these stages has its own set of desired outcomes.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. Like, think about how frustrating it can be to assemble a piece of furniture.
Right.
Even if the final product is great, that difficult assembly process, that's a pain point in the consumption chain, and it can negatively impact the whole experience.
Absolutely. A clunky setup can really sour the whole thing, even if the end result is what you wanted.
Okay, and is that all of them?
Almost.
Yeah.
Finally, you have buyer's financial desired outcomes. These are the financial metrics that the person or entity making the purchase decision is trying to optimize.
Right.
It's really important to recognize that the buyer and the end user might be different people with different priorities. Like a hospital administrator buying medical equipment is going to have different financial goals in mind than the doctor who's actually going to be using that equipment on patients.
That's a really good point. Different stakeholders have different needs and considerations.
Exactly.
So this JTBD framework, it's incredibly thorough. It's like dissecting the entire customer experience and identifying specific needs at every point.
That's the whole idea.
Yeah.
It argues that a deep, nuanced understanding of all these needs is the foundation for predictable innovation.
You can't really innovate if you only have a partial picture of what your customers are trying to achieve and how they measure success.
Precisely.
Okay, so JTBD gives us this like comprehensive framework. Now, how do we actually take that understanding and turn it into successful innovations? That's where ODI, outcome-driven innovation, comes into play, right?
You got it. ODI is the systematic process for actually applying JTBD theory in the real world. And it's associated with, as we mentioned earlier, that much higher success rate.
Okay, so what are the key steps in the ODI process?
So Ulwick lays out 10 key steps.
10 steps. All right, let's hear them.
It starts with defining the customer. This means clearly identifying who the end user is, who supports the product lifecycle, and who ultimately makes the purchase decisions.
Okay, so we're talking about really understanding all the stakeholders involved.
Exactly. Then step 2 is defining the job to be done, focusing on that core functional job we talked about.
Right, the fundamental thing the customer is trying to achieve.
Step 3 is uncovering customer needs. And this is where a tool called the Universal Job Map comes in handy.
Job map, okay.
It's essentially a detailed flowchart of the entire process the customer goes through to get the job done, from start to finish. It helps you systematically identify all the steps where needs might arise, and then you capture those very specific desired outcome statements for each step.
So the job map ensures we're not overlooking any part of the customer experience.
Exactly. Then step 4 is to find segments of opportunity. This is where ODI departs from traditional market segmentation, which often relies on demographics or product usage. With ODI, you segment the market based on unmet needs. You're looking for groups of customers who share similar underserved desired outcomes.
I see. So it's about finding the pockets of the market where customers are not satisfied with the current solutions.
Exactly. And then you define the value proposition, how your offering is going to address those specific unmet needs. Step 6 is to conduct the competitive analysis. But instead of just comparing features and functions, you're evaluating how well each existing solution addresses those prioritized desired outcomes.
Okay, so it's not just about what the competition is doing, but how well they're meeting those specific needs.
Right. Step 7 is to formulate the innovation strategy, deciding which segments of unmet needs you're going to target. Step 8 involves targeting hidden growth opportunities. And this often involves using something called the opportunity algorithm.
Opportunity algorithm, what's that?
It's a quantitative tool that helps you prioritize which unmet needs represent the biggest opportunities, based on their importance to the customer and their current level of satisfaction.
Got it. So it helps you focus your efforts on the areas where you can have the biggest impact.
Exactly. Then you formulate the market strategy, aligning your messaging and positioning to clearly communicate how you address those key unmet needs. And finally, step 10 is to formulate the product strategy, deciding on the features, functionalities, and services that will deliver on your value proposition.
This sounds like a much more methodical and data-driven approach than the kind of, brainstorming and gut feeling methods that many companies still use.
It is. ODI is very much a needs-first approach. You start with a deep understanding of what the customer is trying to achieve, and then you develop solutions that are designed to meet those specific needs.
Okay, I'm really starting to see the power of this approach. Now, the book also talks about a jobs to be done growth strategy matrix. What is that, and how does it tie into all of this?
The Growth Strategy Matrix is a framework that helps companies decide on the most effective growth strategy based on their understanding of which customer segments have unmet needs and which segments are having their needs met really well, maybe even overserved.
Interesting. So it's about aligning your strategy with the specific needs of the market.
Exactly. And it outlines 5 distinct strategic paths.
5 paths. Okay, tell me more about them.
So the first one is the differentiated strategy. This involves targeting customers whose needs are underserved with a solution that performs significantly better and is often priced at a premium. A great example is the Nest thermostat. It addressed needs around ease of use and energy efficiency so much better than traditional thermostats that it justified a higher price.
Right, so it's about focusing on a specific segment that's not being well served and offering them a superior solution, even if it costs more.
Exactly. Then you have the dominant strategy. This aims to capture a large portion of the market by offering a solution that is both significantly better and significantly cheaper than the alternatives. Think of companies like Google Search, which offered a much better search experience for free, or Netflix streaming, which provided more content and convenience at a lower price. This is often seen as the holy grail of innovation.
Better and cheaper, it's a powerful combination. What's the next one?
The disruptive strategy. This one targets customers who are overserved by existing solutions or even non-consumers who aren't using any solution at all. The key is to provide a solution that is simpler, more convenient, and much cheaper, even if it doesn't have all the bells and whistles of the more expensive options.
So like making a good enough product that's more accessible to a wider range of people.
Exactly. Think of Google Docs as a simpler, free alternative to traditional office software, or TurboTax offering a DIY option for taxes.
Makes sense. Okay, what about the other two?
Then you have the discrete strategy. This one is a bit different. It targets customers in situations where they have limited choices, and they often end up paying more for a solution that might actually be inferior to what's available elsewhere. Think of the high prices you see for food and drinks at airports or sporting events. They can get away with it because they know people don't have many other options.
It's situational pricing.
Exactly. And finally, you have the sustaining strategy. This involves making incremental improvements to existing solutions, offering slightly better performance or a slightly lower price.
Right.
And while this is important for staying competitive, it's less likely to create major shifts in the market. Customers usually need a more compelling reason to switch.
So this matrix gives companies a way to evaluate their position and choose a growth path based on whether they're addressing underserved or overserved segments of the market.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And the key to using it effectively is having that solid understanding of customer needs, which we get through the ODI process.
Okay, that makes sense. So the book also has a bunch of real-world examples, case studies of companies that have actually put these principles into action.
Yeah, there's some really great examples.
Can you share a few?
Sure. So take Bosch, the power tool company. Through ODI, they discovered that a certain group of Finnish carpenters had specific unmet needs when it came to the precision and adjustability of their circular saws.
Okay.
And this insight led to the development of their very successful CS20 saw model. And it was projected to increase customer satisfaction within that specific segment by a whopping 38%.
Wow, 38%. That's a huge jump.
It is, and it really highlights how powerful it can be to focus on those very specific, often overlooked needs.
Totally. All right, what's another example?
Another great one is Coloplast, the wound care company. They didn't even create new products or change their prices much.
Really?
Yeah, they just focused on understanding the needs of wound care nurses, specifically their need to prevent complications and make their workflows more efficient.
I see.
So they just repositioned their existing products and messaging around those key outcomes.
Wow, so sometimes it's not about creating something radically new. It's about understanding the existing needs and how you can address them better.
Exactly. And they saw double-digit growth as a result.
That's impressive.
Another good one is Arm & Hammer Animal Nutrition.
Arm & Hammer, like the baking soda.
That's right. They have a whole animal nutrition division.
Yeah.
And they shifted their focus from talking mostly to nutritionists to directly engaging with dairy farmers.
Interesting.
They wanted to understand the dairy farmers' core job of optimizing herd productivity.
Okay.
And this broader perspective revealed unmet needs that went beyond just nutrition.
Really? Like what?
Stuff like managing animal health, improving milk quality, and streamlining their operations.
Okay.
So they realigned their messaging, their sales efforts, and even some of their products to address those broader outcomes.
And did it work?
They saw over 30% revenue growth.
That's amazing. It really shows the power of understanding who that real job executor is and what they're trying to accomplish in their wider context.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there are examples of looking beyond just the end user into the consumption chain, like Advanced Medical Optics, or AMO. They provide surgical lenses. And they decided to focus on the needs of materials managers in hospitals,
Materials management.
people who handle the purchasing and logistics of medical supplies.
Okay.
By addressing their needs around communication, order accuracy, and problem resolution, AM implemented some really smart service innovations.
Mm.
And these improvements dramatically boosted their customer satisfaction and loyalty.
So even focusing on those behind-the-scenes players can be a source of valuable innovation.
Exactly. There's also Hussmann. They make refrigerated display cases for supermarkets. And they focused on the jobs of those shoppers who need to find things easily, and the merchandisers who need to display products effectively.
Okay.
This led them to identify unmet needs around the lighting within the cases, like having more accurate color rendering and even light distribution.
Interesting.
And that led to some successful LED lighting innovations for their display cases.
So even something as seemingly simple as lighting can be a source of innovation when you understand the underlying jobs and outcomes.
That's right. Even a large software company like Microsoft found value in this approach. They used it for their software assurance program.
Okay.
And they took a life cycle view of their customer's job of purchasing and managing software.
Mm.
And they realized that they already had internal tools and capabilities that could address many of their customers' unmet needs around things like software deployment and maintenance.
So it's not always about building something new from scratch. Sometimes it's about leveraging what you already have in a way that better addresses the customer's needs.
Exactly. And that's what they did, and it helped them create a more cohesive and valuable offering.
These examples are so great. They really demonstrate the power of JTBD and ODI in action.
And towards the end of the book, there's some guidance on how organizations can build a real, lasting competency and innovation based on these principles.
Okay, what does that look like?
A key takeaway is that for most companies, it's more effective to have a dedicated, focused team responsible for driving innovation. You don't want to spread it too thin across the whole organization.
So creating a specialized capability within the company rather than expecting everyone to suddenly become an innovator.
Exactly. Ulwick suggests a three-phase approach.
Okay.
First, you have to truly understand the customer's job. Second, You use quantitative methods to uncover those hidden opportunities by analyzing how important the desired outcomes are and how satisfied customers are with them. And finally, you use those customer insights to strategically drive growth through targeted innovation efforts.
Got it. And that ultimately leads to a cultural shift from being technology-driven to becoming truly customer
Yeah.
needs-driven. So to wrap it all up, the biggest takeaways for me are like, first, the importance of focusing on that fundamental job the customer is trying to get done, not just the products. Second, really understanding all the customer needs, not just the functional ones, but also the emotional ones and those related to the entire customer journey. And then finally, the value of using a data-driven process like ODI to find those unmet needs and create solutions that are more likely to succeed.
You got it. That's a great summary. And we shouldn't forget that stark difference in success rates we talked about at the beginning. The typical 17% success rate of traditional innovation versus the potential 86% with ODI.
Yeah, that's a huge difference. It really makes you think about how we approach innovation, not just in business, but in every aspect of our
Yeah,
lives.
yeah.
I mean, for any product or service we use or any problem we're trying to solve, what's the real underlying job we're trying to accomplish? What are the specific outcomes we want to achieve?
Those are great questions to ask.
And could applying this JTBD lens help us find new and better solutions?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of potential there. And for anyone who's interested in learning more about all of this, the book mentions some really great resources. Websites like strategen.com, anthonyulwick.com, and jtbdinstitute.org.
Oh, and of course, there's the book itself, Jobs to be Done, Theory to Practice by Anthony Ulwick. It's a really great read for anyone who wants to dive deeper into this.
Definitely.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into jobs to be done and outcome-driven innovation. Thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your insights.
It was my pleasure.
And thank you, our listener, for joining us. We hope you'll join us again for our next deep dive as we continue to explore these ideas that shape our world.
Like and subscribe.